This is the European Union, 27 diverse countries that came together, representing a colossal population of over 440 million souls. To put that into perspective, that's more than the United States. Yet when it comes to military prowess, the EU doesn't quite measure up. But this doesn't mean that the EU member states don't allocate resources to their militaries. In fact, EU member states collectively allocated a staggering $312 billion for military expenditures in 2023. Now that's substantial, isn't it? When you stack this up against Russia's $109 billion, you might find yourself wondering, is Europe actually a military superpower? Surprisingly, when we compare EU military spending against other global heavyweights, it secures second spot. Yet despite this large military spend, most EU countries cannot deploy forces, run out of ammunition and spare parts when they fight, and have shockingly low levels of readiness. Especially Germany, the EU's largest defense spender, is currently facing a significant military crisis. In a striking interview, a former top German general described the German military as being in its worst state ever, lacking the capability to defend both Germany and its allies, and even posing a significant risk to itself. This situation has even led to light-hearted but critical comments from NATO allies, like, why are the Germans only terrible at war when they are on our side? So should Germany spend even more? Probably. But we argue that the core issue with European defense isn't about spending levels, which are substantial, but rather structural problems, starting with limited interoperability and duplication. During the 2011 NATO intervention in Libya, European air forces struggled because their different planes, like French Rafales, British Eurofighters, and Italian Tornadoes, needed unique care. This made joint operations like refueling and strikes hard, showing the need for more standardization in European military planes. Today, EU militaries collectively use over 17 different types of tanks, nearly 20 types of combat aircraft, and more than 10 types of tanker aircraft. The variety of equipment complicates joint training and operations, as different units require access to various spare parts and components. EU members use a staggering 178 different major weapon systems, compared to the United States' 30. Europe also faces higher defense costs due to missed economies of scale. McKinsey reports that joint equipment procurements could save Europe 30% in costs, about $15 billion annually. So what is the best way forward for European defense? Should the European Union take a bigger role, or should we rely solely on NATO? At EU Made Simple, we've put our heads together and mapped out the various stages of military integration within the EU into a 4-tiered pyramid. The idea isn't necessarily to reach the top tier as the ultimate objective, but to consider it the highest level of integration that can be achieved. If the EU doesn't integrate at all and stays at the bottom level of the pyramid, it will continue to rely heavily on the US, but as we move up the pyramid, our reliance on them decreases. The base of our pyramid is essential. All European countries must align on foreign policy. This step is crucial. Without it, European countries will never reach consensus on key issues, such as military missions or defense budgets. As we move up the pyramid, the next stage involves deeper cooperation within the EU in specific areas. First, the EU could pool together resources for a joint defense budget to enhance military capabilities and funding for joint exercises. Second, the EU could oversee joint military assets, such as drones or transport aircraft, making them combat-ready and available for both EU and NATO missions. Third, the EU could encourage industries across member states to cooperate, aiming to fortify Europe's defense sector. And fourth, the EU could encourage shared procurement, with EU countries buying together and leverage economies of scale. There are, of course, many other areas of cooperation, but these are some of the main ones. The next tier introduces the concept of an army of Europeans. Think of this as a collective force of, let's say, 60,000 soldiers from various EU countries, equipped and training together. This force would complement, not replace, national armies, offering a way for countries to blend some of their military capabilities into a larger EU effort while still retaining their individual forces. Now, reaching the very top of our pyramid, we have the concept of a full EU army. This is about building a unified military from the ground up, drawing on the EU's population to form a single cohesive force. is obviously a long-term vision that would require developing new training regimes, strategies, and crucially, EU structures. Initially, this would depend on support from the militaries of member states, but the aim could eventually be to have one single unified force representing all of Europe. By this point, many of you are probably thinking that the EU is already active on multiple tiers, and you are right. The EU has agreements in place to try and align foreign policy, PESCO for collaborative projects, and a 13 billion defense fund for R&D. And even in Tier 3, there are the EU battle groups, consisting of 1,500 soldiers for rapid crisis response. It all sounds promising, right? Unfortunately, there's a significant snag in how initiatives are playing out in reality. The root of the issue traces back to the foundational tier, achieving a truly unified foreign policy. Consider the European battle groups, which were introduced in 2007. But guess what? They have never been deployed. There have been critical moments, such as the conflict in the Congo in 2008, the upheaval in Libya in 2011, and the prolonged engagement in Afghanistan, where the deployment of battle groups could have made significant impact. The big problem? It's all about unanimity. Every one of the 27 EU countries has to agree before any action can be taken. And if even one country says no, nothing happens. This makes it really tough for the EU to act fast or use rapid response teams, like the European battle groups, even when they're needed. This is why there's also a tier that you probably did not expect, Tier 0, reflecting the current predominant state of the EU, relying mainly on national foreign policies and armies. So what are the benefits of moving up the pyramid? Firstly, it gives the EU more strategic autonomy. This means that Europe can act independently when it's in its interest to do so. Some geopolitical conflicts might be a high priority for the EU, but simply not for the US, so the EU should have the capability to act without US support. For example, the situation in Ukraine. Secondly, it positions Europe as a more robust partner within NATO, equal to the United States, and makes NATO stronger and better equipped to address global issues. A unified European pillar within NATO that spends 2% of GDP on the military is much better equipped than 27 individual member states, each spending 2% of their GDP on their very own national militaries, which causes duplication. Thirdly, enhanced military integration can lead to more efficient use of resources. By pooling military assets, research and development, and procurement processes, the EU can achieve economies of scale and increasing the effectiveness of its defense capabilities. There are also drawbacks of moving up the pyramid. Firstly, deeper integration might lead to sovereignty concerns among member states. Some countries may be reluctant to cede control over their national defense policies and military decisions to a centralized EU authority. Secondly, achieving consensus among all EU member states on military matters can be challenging. Different nations have varying security priorities, threat perceptions, and political landscapes, which can complicate decision-making processes and delay timely actions. Thirdly, there's the risk of duplicating efforts with NATO, leading to inefficiencies and potential conflict of interest. So which tier do you think the EU should move towards? Stay at 0 or move all the way up to Tier 4? Let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're interested in supporting our work, please subscribe to the channel or consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Your help keeps us going. Catch you in the next video.